And okay, well, this is really good because let's see. Um, Greg, are you here this morning?
Yep.
Okay. And Emilio, how are you doing?
I'm doing good.
Okay. So I'll put Greg and Emilio. You guys are up first. So look at this first problem. Is there anything that kind of gives you a pause about anything here? Well, I'll tell you before you get going is that honestly, whenever I see a 0 in an ignifium problem, I, get a little bit worried. So I'm not saying that it's not fine, but if it was me, I would change the problem to get rid of the 0. And see, here we're having that rendering problem, minus, minus, plus, minus. That's weird. So there now I have a good version. Everything looks normal. So this is kind of important for you all. Again, you have to supply some judgment when the problems are randomly generated like this, because again, every once in a while it'll render incorrectly. Sometimes I do an estimate for students and I say, well, based on my experience with the system, if you solve about and I did a calculation one time to figure it out, but let's say the whole time that you're in this class, like 200 problems, you may end up with 2 or 3 of those that are goofy, right? And what's important is that you're able to know, right, that the way that an inverse demand function should look and know what an inverse supply function would look like, obeying the law of demand and the law of supply, downward sloping, stuff like that. If that's shaky for you, then you just need more practice, and you need to think about it a little bit more carefully, because if you try to answer questions that are ill posed, then you're just going to struggle. Yeah. So here's a good question, and we introduced these 2 ideas, which are price ceilings and price floors. Now we haven't talked about them in lecture, which I'll do in a little while, but this is the activity portion. So I'll just kind of cut to the chase and tell you what you have to do. So for a price ceiling, a price ceiling, I like to call them price caps. Okay, they're something that prevent the price from going too high, and a price floor is it's like a price support. It prevents the price from going too low, and so you always have to ask yourself, well, is it too low or too high relative to what? And the answer is it's always relative to the equilibrium price, because the equilibrium price is what would happen. It's the price that would prevail. Remember, that's the language we use from talking about lecture last time. That's what would prevail in the absence of any sort of price regulation, a price ceiling or a price floor. So for all of these problems, in order to figure them out, you have to first compute the equilibrium price. So Emilio and Greg, go ahead and work on question number 1. And the first thing that I want you to do is to compute the equilibrium price and then tell me whether or not it's higher or lower than the price ceiling price. Okay, and I'll give you guys just a couple of minutes. I'll go and refill my coffee. and then we'll come back. And do me a favor, and let's see. I'll put Joshua. You here this morning? Joshua Short?
Yeah, I'm here.
Yeah, you do me a favor and go ahead and monitor the chat for questions, and then and let me know if there's any good questions, because again, I can't have everything up on my screen. And Greg and Emilio, go ahead and put in chat as soon as you're ready. Just say ready, okay? Does anybody have any questions? Okay, I'm gonna give you a couple minutes then.
Professor, you're both ready.
I think he's grabbing coffee.
Oops, my bad.
I am grabbing coffee, and then I got distracted by my dogs. So, okay. So, Emilio, why don't you go ahead and tell us, so what did you find out for the equilibrium?
Yeah, so I got the equilibrium and it was higher than the price ceiling.
Well, tell us what you got for the equilibrium.
Yeah, for the equilibrium, I got, let me hang on, sorry, 18.3.
And what about you, Greg? Did you get the same thing?
Yeah, so for the equilibrium, I got 18.3. And then for the price, it was 41.66.
Well, when you say for the price, I'm a little bit confused about that. You mean the quantity, right?
Oh, yeah, sorry. The quantity is 18.33.
Okay, yeah. And then the price, you substitute that quantity, the equilibrium quantity, back in to either of these equations, and then you get the price as 41, right?
Correct.
Is that what you think? So yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So then obviously you guys can see that the price ceiling is below the equilibrium price, right? So the price ceiling is going to prevent prices from rising up to the equilibrium price, right? Right, does everybody agree?
Yeah.
Okay. Now, this is a little bit even more complicated, right? Because the price, I mean, it's not more complicated, but it's worth taking into consideration. So the price ceiling price, right? It's really, really close to what we called the limit price for the supply function. You see, the limit price is 5. So this is a really, really, really low price relative to what suppliers would be willing to supply, but it still works, so we're fine. So it says how much will be demanded at the price ceiling price. So in order to solve that one, right, what we would have to do is the first equation here is the demand equation. And so we would put this price ceiling price, we'd substitute it in for P here on the left-hand side of the equation, and then solve for the quantity, which is the Q sub B, which is the quantity demanded. So you guys want to go ahead and do that? And I don't know if you already did or not, but.
Yes, I got 91 for that.
Okay, so Greg got 91, and what about you, Emilio?
Yeah, I got that too.
Okay, so I don't know. That doesn't look quite right to me, right? So if we put 6 is equal to 115 minus 4 QB, right? Then you guys did that. Right?
I think it's 27.25.
Well, okay. I appreciate that, Chinlin. That was Chinlin, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Let's just stick with Emilio and Greg for a minute, make sure that they have it. But you guys see Emilio and Greg, if I put 6 over here, right, I have 6 is equal to 115 minus 4 QB, right? And then I have to solve for QB.
Oh yeah, I got 27.25.
Yeah, so do you see Greg?
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. So you'd end up with 4 is equal to 109, and then 4 QB is equal to 109, and then you have to divide 109 by 4 to get QB.
Got it.
Okay, and 27.25. So thanks to everybody. And by the way, Chinlin, I would normally, if they got stuck, I would call on other people too, but I appreciate you helping. Okay, so let's go ahead and do the next question, right? So this one, let's see, I will pick, let's see. Well, Chinlin, since you're helping this morning, I'll put you on the next one, okay? And how about Stephen Schlosser? Are you here? Stephen?
Yes.
Okay. So you and Chinlin work on number 2, and I'll give you guys like 2 minutes. And Joshua, will you still do me the favor of monitoring the chat, so as soon as they're ready, they can say yeah? And
Yeah, of course.
let me know. Okay, thanks. Okay, now before we get started on this, do you guys have a question? You should be fine with this because it's excess demand, and I think you should be familiar with that concept. But if you read the question and you have a question, then that's fine. So I'm gonna do the same thing we did last time. We'll take this step by step. So, but if you guys have any questions at the beginning, no? Okay, all right, talk to you in a minute. Okay, so how's it going? Okay, Chinlin, how are you doing?
I'm done, but I don't know it's right though.
Yeah, well, okay. And what about you, Steven?
Yeah, I got an answer.
Okay, so let's go ahead and go. I mean, what's nice about this is the system of equations is the same, so we can still do our kind of sanity check, which we should. And by the way, the reason I'm doing this is not because it's unnecessary to solve the problems. In fact, you will find out that there are some questions where the price ceiling is above the equilibrium price, in which case the equilibrium price prevails and nothing happens in the market, which means there's no excess demand and no excess supply. So we said before, do you remember, Stephen? I don't know if you computed it again, you remember from last time, but our equilibrium price here is what? Or
No, I didn't compute that, no.
Yeah, well, just to be clear, you got to. Like, I mean, I know we know because it's the same system as before and it's 7 and 6, but if you don't compute the equilibrium price first and you just go ahead and like begin to plug and chug, then you'll end up computing stuff that's just wrong for some of the answers. And again, it depends on which random numbers you get. But if you don't check to make sure that the price ceiling is below the equilibrium price, then you could run into trouble. So do you remember what we said the equilibrium price was, Chinlin? Because I think actually you computed it last time.
Yeah, 27.25. I think.
Yeah, so 27.25 is what
Yeah.
we said. And so sure enough, this price ceiling, and the term that we're going to use for this is we're going to say that it's binding, okay, which means that it actually has an impact on the price in the market. So this concept of excess demand, so do you remember what it relates to, Stephen?
No,
What's that? No?
no.
No, okay. And what about you, Chinlin?
I don't know.
Oh, okay. Well, okay. So you guys said you came up with an answer. So what was your answer, Stephen? What did you come up with?
I got 27.
You got 27. I mean, do you want to tell us how you got that?
Just by plugging 7 into the demand side of the equation.
Yeah. So excess demand is how much more the quantity demanded is than is the quantity supplied. Okay. So actually, you'd have to take the 7 and plug it into the supply side and solve for Q to find out what suppliers are willing to supply at a price of 7, and then compare it to how much buyers want to buy, right? And then you'll be able to see if you take the difference between the two. And in this case, it's really easy because can you see, Stephen, if I put 7 into the supply inverse supply function over here,
Yeah,
then
we
how
just
much
equals
there's,
1.
yeah. So suppliers are going to want to supply 1 unit, but buyers want to buy, you said 27 units, right? So
Correct.
there are going to be 26 buyers or 26 units of excess demand, right? That is buyers who won't be served by the suppliers. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's what excess demand is about. at every price below the equilibrium price, there will be excess demand or a shortage of the good. And that tends to drive prices up when you're below the equilibrium to the equilibrium. And the other concept is if you have a price that's above the equilibrium, you get excess supply. So let's see, 26. And do you see how I computed that, Chinlin?
Yeah, that's what I got.
Okay, good job. Good job. Okay, so let's go ahead and work on the next one. So question number 3. So given this demand and supply system, and let's we'll do Benjamin Garcia, you here? Benjamin?
Yeah, sorry, I had some trouble with my mic.
Yeah, it's okay. So you can go ahead and work on number 3, and let's see who else we have here. How about Miles? How are you doing this morning?
Good, sir.
Okay, so go ahead and take a number 3 also, and I'll give you both a couple of minutes, and then as soon as you're ready, go ahead and type ready in the chat. And we got you, Joshua, as our chat monitor, okay? All right, see you in just a minute. Okay, I can see Miles is ready. And okay, and Benjamin's ready. Great. Okay, so Miles, what did you come up with? How much of this good will be traded, do you think?
I think 19.
You think 19 units. And so and what do you think, Benjamin?
I got 1 unit.
So you said 1 unit will be traded. So you know, when we have disagreements in academia, you realize how we solve those types of problems, right? The general method for getting to the truth of the correct answer. Miles?
Wait, what was that, sir?
I said, so you see that you and Benjamin have a disagreement, right?
Yeah.
So you understand in academia how we get, when there's a disagreement, how we get to the truth. What do we do?
I don't know, just like compare work, I guess.
it's a wrestle off. Might makes right. So I'm gonna have to.
That sounds
wet.
that sounds good.
Yeah. No. You were right the first time. We reasoned through things and we reached consensus. So let's hear your reasons for picking 19. What did you do?
Well, I plugged the quantity of. I
Oh,
plugged
go
a
ahead.
7 into
Yeah.
the quantity.
Okay, but you see,
But
it says
now
at a
that
price.
now that I'm looking at it, I realize I did it wrong.
Yeah. Okay. Well. Yeah. Okay. So let's go ahead and talk to Benjamin and see. So explain your answer to us.
So first off, I just double checked that the equilibrium price or the ceiling price was below the equilibrium price, and then I went ahead and solved for QV by plugging in 7.
Okay, so you went to QV for how much will be traded. Do you want to explain that?
I'm sorry?
I said you plugged 7 into this supply equation, right?
Correct.
And you got an answer, but why did you do that?
I just figured that honestly, since the last one was dealing with demand and excess and we used the demand function, I just thought that if we were gonna have like extra like surplus or like supply, like that's gonna be what we trade.
Okay. Well, just to be clear on number 2, remember we used both the demand equation and the supply equation, and we said suppliers wanted to supply 1 unit, and buyers wanted to purchase 27 units. So then we took the difference between those to get the excess demand, and we got 26 units of excess demand. And right, but down here, when you're saying how much of the good will be traded, let's just think about this. So if suppliers want to sell 1 unit at a price of 7, but buyers want to buy 27 units, how many units do you think are actually going to be traded? And traded means, right, a seller trades it to a buyer. I'm waiting for you to.
I'm sorry, that kind of broke up a little bit. I didn't hear that completely.
Yeah. So I said so sellers at a price of 7 want to sell 1 unit, and buyers want to buy 27 units at a price of 7. So how many units are going to actually be traded? What do you think is going to happen?
There's only going to be that 1 unit that gets traded because that's all that's being supplied by the suppliers.
Yeah, and that makes sense, right? I mean, if you think about it, if there's something out there that's at a price of, in this case, $7, I don't know what it would be. Do you have an idea, Benjamin? Anything you purchased for $7? I can only think of one thing off the top of my head.
Like probably like a meal from like a fast food spot, probably.
Yeah. Like I was thinking. So last night, I had a Western bacon cheeseburger for dinner. It's a pretty good burger, but it's about $7. And if Carl's Jr. only wanted to sell 1 of them, but the drive-through had 27 cars in it, right? The first person would get to buy that 1 burger, and everybody else would have to just order something else, right?
Yeah.
And the important part about this is that we're talking about a situation in which there's free trade, and that means that the buyers can't force the suppliers in any way, nor can the suppliers force the buyers to buy at particular prices. People just look at the price and they decide if they're going to trade or not. So yeah, so one's the correct answer. So did you understand what we did, Miles? Miles? Are you good?
Oh yeah, I see what I did wrong.
Yeah, okay. Okay, so let's see. It's 8:26. I'm gonna take a 10-minute break, and then we'll come back and we'll go to the main lecture. Unless somebody else has any quick questions. Are there any quick questions?
Professor, what does the caret stand for?
Oh, it's just a marker, right? So I think, like in this case, notice how the marker, this is called a cap, and down here it's a cup, right? And so I think the indication is that this is a price cap. It kind of keeps prices from going up, right? Caps them. And this is the price floor is a price cup, which is trying to say it's like catching, like a cup, catches water from falling down. I think that's the symbols, but it's just a marker. Some text they'll put a little tilde over it, or I like to in class to use like a bar over it, but it's just a decoration for the price.
Gotcha. All right, thank you.
Sure. Okay. Good question though. Totally good question. What do we mean? Okay, so I'll see you all in just a minute. And here. So, how's everybody doing? I'm hoping everybody's doing just fine. So we want to talk a little bit more about this, and I know you all have been watching the videos about competitive markets generally, and we've talked a lot about this, but we kind of have to do something to make a fine point on this. So Arslan, are you here this morning?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay, so I'll chat with you a little bit. So we have this overarching idea that competitive markets are efficient, and we understand that there's lots of other issues besides efficiency that are important to the allocation of resources, but efficiency is a consideration. It's the one that economists are mostly focused on. But do you remember that as we interpret this phrase, there's like a lot of different layers for attaching kind of meaning to it, and really, at the end of the day, kind of like the real meat of it is, if we're in a situation where we have a price taking equilibrium, with no asymmetric information and no externalities, then we're going to be at a Pareto efficient outcome, but in a practical sense, what we measure and what we normally focus on is then our net social benefit. And remember, this is another way of talking about total surplus, is maximized. So Arslan, does what I've written for the interpretation, does it make sense to you? Are you okay with it? Or do you have any questions?
Yeah, it makes sense. So you're saying that in a perfectly competitive market that is Pareto efficient, then net social benefit or total surplus, that would be maximized.
Yeah, and I also want to tell you now, this is like, you know, fair warning. I have actually on the final exam, you know, so we have graphs and we have stuff we do on Ignithium, and then I'll ask people to, you know, do a little something else. And so I have in the past, I didn't last semester, but I think maybe 2 semesters ago, I had one question on the final exam that was just like a short response, which was explain the first fundamental welfare theorem. So I don't want anybody to think that the stuff that we're talking about is, well, it's just like background information and we just want to focus on solving the problems. Now, I'll tell you, right, Arslan, if it is the case that you're only shooting for a C in the class, then it's fine. You're not going to fail the class because you can't recite you know, details about the first fundamental welfare theorem. But it really is the central concept of all of microeconomics. So, you know, if you're trying to get a good grade in the class, you don't want to let it slip just because it doesn't show up on a problem on Ignithium. You know, if we're going to answer this kind of question, do you have an idea, Arslan, like how we would go about demonstrating this? Because I don't think we've given a proper demonstration of it yet. Though it's talked about in the videos. I don't know if you watched any of the videos.
I would assume that you try to calculate net social benefit to have
Yeah.
a number to you know, show off.
Right. Yeah. So that's exactly what like the first part of the class is supposed to be about. It's supposed to be about, okay, let's understand the first fundamental welfare theorem well enough that we can actually give a demonstration of it. Now, our demonstration is, you know, not a complete proof, because honestly, giving a proof of this is beyond the scope of the class. It's something that most people wouldn't actually see until they get to graduate school. But there's a Nobel Prize winner, and you know, I think probably like most PhD economists, you know, like if you were somebody in the minor leagues in baseball, and that's what like most of us all are, we're like minor leaguers, you know. But you have people in the majors that are your heroes. Like most people probably who have a PhD in economics that are teaching at Cal Poly, if you were to sit down and talk to them, then like, well, who do you admire? Who's you know, like your favorite Nobel Prize winner? Most people would probably have somebody. And I don't know. So do you have one, Arslan? I know you're not in graduate school now. I don't know if you're going to go to graduate school, but
Do I have a favorite Nobel Prize winner?
Nobel Prize winner, yeah.
Do you have one?
Yeah, of course.
Okay,
I have a
yeah,
lot.
let's go with you.
I
You got a few, right?
have a lot. So my favorite is a gentleman by the name of Ken Arrow, and he passed away recently. But he did a lot of great work in the 60s and 70s and 80s, and then I got to see him speak a couple of times in early 2000, before he passed away. And I don't know how old he was, 97 or whatever. The last place he was at Stanford, but he's actually the person who gets credit for demonstrating this or proving it in the most general sense. So he does it like for general function spaces and all this stuff. So we have some confidence that as long as we're talking about general situations where the economic agents are rational, that we're going to end up with, if we have a competitive market equilibrium, we're going to end up with an efficient outcome. And we don't spend a whole lot of time talking about the assumption of rationality, but it's really key for modern economic theory, because I don't remember if in a prior discussion we talked about rationality. Did we already talk about rationality a little bit?
We haven't talked about rationality yet.
Yeah,
no.
yeah. So the problem with the word rationality is, and we'll have a chance to talk about it a little bit later, but even at this point in time, we can kind of penetrate the idea a bit. So what do you think it means? And I'll have to tell you at the outset that even though deviations from rationality are becoming more common in economic theory, I would say that there's like open investigations into the assumptions underlying rationality. Most people agree that the 90, let's say 95%, I used to say like 99%, but let's say 95% of the economic models assume rationality, that they do a really good job of predicting human behavior in most settings. So what do you think rationality means? What are we getting at?
I would say that it's the assumption that models will work as expected.
Well, okay, I'll say no, but I bet maybe I'll give you a little bit more to work with. So rationality, remember, we're talking about how human beings behave, and we're trying to model human behavior. And so we assume, and this is actually, it's kind of a little bit of a joke in the social sciences, because it's the thing that economists are most criticized for as an underlying assumption of our models, amongst people who are non-economists, but like PhDs in psychology or sociology or something like that, people that also study human behavior. And so we assume, for example, that the buyers are rational and the sellers are rational. So it's an assumption about human behavior. So now that I've kind of narrowed it down, it's not models per se, it's the modeling of human behavior. So does that help any?
Sure. I guess then it would be that buyers and sellers, they work in a way that makes sense for, I don't know, what benefits them or what we would expect them to, their own self.
Okay. Okay, so you're saying self-interested, and that's good. And the reason why I want to talk about this is because actually I hate the word rationality because it causes so much misunderstanding. And it's because we use it in a technical sense, and so it's jargon from our discipline. But economists and other social scientists have to kind of play this game with people that are not indoctrinated, right? That are not members of our field, with lay people. And so there's often a temptation to use language that's not technical and not descriptive of what we're talking about in our discipline, to communicate with a broader audience in a way that gains their interest. And you know why that is? Like, so basically what I'm saying to you is that rationality is the way that economists use it, has very, very little to do with rationality as a word, the way that it's used in dinner table conversation or by the lay public. So why do you think, can you grasp onto why do we use this word?
I suppose to just simplify it, like it's close enough for
Yes.
people to
So
understand.
you're right. But why would we want to simplify, like I said, as an attempt to communicate with a broader audience when, I talked about useful lies before, right? What's the use of this lie?
To maybe this is a bit of a reach, but maybe to like give people confidence that we know what we're doing, that we're able to measure people's behavior.
Yeah. I think you're on the right track. And so but why might we want them to have some confidence in us?
Oh, that's a good question. Because we're getting paid to now.
Yeah. No, I think you're totally right. There's an economic incentive that we want to be able to communicate with people in government, the National Science Foundation. We want funding to keep coming for economic research. We want to, and I will have to say that, people that go to business school and get MBAs and move on and later hire economists as consultants or people in their management staff or something like that, they're all on board with the idea of making money. So as long as we can convince them that, based on the data, that using our models is going to help them develop strategies that are profitable, they're going to keep hiring us. But yeah, I mean, there's this broader idea that, if you're a scientist and you're not somehow conferring benefits to society more broadly, then the funding stream for your work gets cut off. So yeah, it's a temptation to want to garner attention for the discipline that I think encourages us to use words in a way that attracts the attention of the general public. But we also open ourselves up to criticism too, because once people latch onto a word like rationality and they think that they understand what's going on in our discipline, then they feel like they can freely criticize it, which obviously there's got to be something else going on. It's not like economists are dim-witted and they think everybody is rational. So in the dinner table conversation sense. So for example, so we're talking about rationality, and so for you, I don't know, are you a single sibling, or do you have a brother or a sister? Or
I've got 3 younger sisters.
Oh, there you go. You're just like my son. I have 4 and he's the oldest, and he has 3 younger sisters. So do you think are all of your sisters perfectly rational all the time? Would you?
No one in our family is rational most of the time, to be fair. But
in the dinner table conversation sense, right?
Yeah.
So yeah. But what do you mean by that when you say your sister's not rational? I mean, I don't know. I don't want to put you on the spot or embarrass anybody in your family, but if you want to tell us, just so we have an idea of what you mean.
I guess in a general sense, it's a little hard for anyone to be rational as long as like emotions exist, So maybe
Okay.
I made my sister mad earlier, and so the rest of the day, and especially at the dinner table, that anger will be coming through against anything I say.
Yeah. And so like I notice, like with my daughters, I would say it's irrational, like somebody, when they're in middle school, like posts something on Instagram or whatever, somebody they don't even know. and they just get outraged and overwhelmed, and they like wreck their whole day. That's one example. But to be more specific, yeah, I think what you're getting at is kind of right. And the way that a lot of economic research has gone forward in the last, I would say, decade, is exploring these situations where emotions kind of overwhelm a strategic or a calculated response to achieving some objective. And again, there's been lots of research. There's this game that people play called Split the Pie, or the Dictator Game. And basically the way that it works is, and this is with real money, I'm one participant, and let's say you're the second participant, and I'm the dictator. And so the people in the experiment give me an amount of money, like $10 or $20, right? And then I get to determine what the split is between you and me. And either you get to accept it, and if you accepted the split, then I get my portion and you get your portion. But if you reject it, we both don't get anything. You kind of see the setup?
Yep.
And so in that kind of a situation, the rational model says, like, suppose they give me $20 and I offer you a penny, right? Should you accept it or should you reject it?
Rejected.
Why? Right? A penny's better than nothing, and you get nothing if you reject it.
But you get $19.99.
Well, I
And
get
that's
it. I get
unfair.
$19.99. Oh, okay. Yeah. So you're kind of hitting on something, right? But from a strictly rational perspective, the prediction would be that, or let's just make it a little bit more balanced. Like, I say I'll take 19 and I'll give you $1. $1's better than nothing. And
Right. Rationally speaking, $1 is better than nothing. I should be taking the $1.
yeah, but a lot of people reject those low offers, and from an economics perspective, they're acting irrational, and they play these games with people sitting in functional MRI machines that measure the blood flow and the activity in the brain. And so some people call it neuroeconomics. It's a crossover between neuroscience and economics, studying this type of behavior in people. And actually what happens is there's the way the human brain is designed, and I'm not a brain expert, I've just read some of these studies, is you've got your frontal cortex, and that's where you do your calculation and sort of like rational thought. you start to thinking about calculus, that part of your brain gets activated. And then you have your lower brain, which is closer to your brain stem, and that has all of your like emotional reactions in them. And when people get lowball offers, then that region of their brain gets activated, and they tend to reject the offers. They're a lot of people call that lower brain like their reptilian brain, you know. So people don't always act rationally in every context because they do get overwhelmed by emotion. But we discount that in economics, and this is gonna be the technical definition. So rationality just means that people make, you know, calculated responses based on a strategy centered on self-interest, making themselves better off. So we've kind of said a lot of this. Okay. Technically, we boil this down to saying that people have complete monotonic and transitive preferences. That's the substance of rationality. And honestly, for me, I prefer to say that the rationality assumption is people, and these are economic agents. Economic agents is the way we talk about individual decision makers within our models. Okay, so buyers and sellers are economic agents more generally. So economic agents have CMT, complete monotonic and transitive preferences. So if you asked me, I would rather not use rationality at all and just say, oh, economic agents have CMT preferences. And you know why that is? Arslan?
Why do people or economic agents have
No,
CMT
yeah,
preferences?
why would I prefer to just say CMT preferences instead of rationality?
It's a more detailed answer.
Yeah, and also it cuts off the criticisms of folks who really don't know what we're talking about, right? Because they know, oh, if I say CMT preferences to some psychologist, they're just going to go blank, right? Because they know they don't know. But if I say people are rational, then, you know, they can make this argument about, well, what do we mean by rationality? Do people get overwhelmed by emotions and stuff like that? Yeah, I mean, if I just say CMT preferences, then I can be clear and specific, and they have to argue more deeply, right? They have to understand something in order to object. Now, okay, so rationality means people have CMT preferences, and we're going to talk in a little bit more about what complete monotonic and transitive preferences actually mean in like our next unit for this course, which is talking about consumer behavior and utility maximization. But for the time being, you should just know that this first fundamental welfare theorem, the competitive markets are efficient, it is based on this notion that people in the markets are going to act rationally in this narrow sense, that they're going to do what's in their own personal best interest. And if for some reason we see a deviation from that in a particular setting, then we would know that our model wasn't a good model for that situation. And economists do have these and are developing these other ways of characterizing the way that human beings respond in particular situations where it deviates from rationality. But guess what, Arslan? There's good news. You want to know what the good news is?
Yes, please.
That based on, I mean, obviously, economists are generally the highest paid of all social scientists. and the reason why we should take comfort in that is that our models work well enough that they describe most human behavior in most situations based on the evidence we've collected, such that they are highly useful to business and government in decision making, and that's why they pay us. So if somewhere in the back of your head you're concerned about, well, there are like flaws and assumptions and stuff like that, there's really good evidence that most of the time, and I would actually, benchmark it based on the evidence that I've seen, that about from experiments that have been conducted, that about 70% of the time, folks do behave rationally. And so our models based on rationality are from the scientific standard, which is, remember, in the background, there's this whole scientific method, right? And so you make a hypothesis, and then you gather experimental data to see if your hypothesis correctly describes a situation. And most of the data that's been collected, the rational model does really well. That doesn't mean that we're not trying to close in on those other 30% of the cases and do better. But our basic model is really good. It's kind of a little bit like, do you know anything about the history of physics, Arslan?
A little bit, sure.
Yeah. So who is the person that you would normally point to as being, the first contributor?
Isaac Newton.
Yeah, Newton, right? And so they have Newtonian mechanics, right? I don't know if you're familiar with that idea.
A little bit, yeah.
Yeah, so Newtonian mechanics describes how objects move and interact here on Earth, kind of like, at sea level, where it's a normal sort of situation. And Newtonian mechanics does a really great job of describing things that we normally see. But do you know when Newtonian mechanics breaks down, the people who are more modern contributors to physics get that kind of get a lot of attention for describing things that don't obey the laws of Newton.
Anything in space?
Yeah, well,
I
so
guess Newton could only
Einstein.
measure what was on Earth.
Yeah, so Einstein. So the theory of relativity. So the theory of relativity does a good job of describing what happens when things go close to the speed of light, or you're talking about like supermassive objects, black holes and that kind of stuff. And then some other folks, Schrodinger is one of them, have had a lot of success at describing things on a quantum scale, things that are super small, right? Subatomic particles and things like that. So quantum theory and relativity theory, right? They don't change Newton. Newton's really good. And if you're going to be an engineer, you're going to study Newtonian mechanics for most of what you do. But you have these particular situations where Newtonian mechanics doesn't work really well, and physics has gone on and developed more theory there. So the type of theory that we're talking about in this class is what we would call neoclassical economics. And that assumes that all the agents are rational. And it's kind of like Newtonian mechanics. It explains most everyday situations really well where economics has something to contribute. But the modern behavioral and experimental economics really dig into this issue of rationality, and where they're most useful are in situations where rationality fails, and we can see that happening. So it's a good idea to just kind of have a lay of the land and know, okay, we're talking about the first fundamental welfare theorem, and competitive markets are efficient, but this is part of neoclassical economics, and it's not the end of the story. So let's go back to our demonstration a little bit, how our demonstration would work. And you see there's the demand curve, right? I'm going to keep talking to you, Arslan. Thanks for your contributions. And here is the supply curve, right? That all look good to you?
Yep.
And then over here, we would have an equilibrium price, and here's an equilibrium quantity. And if we were going to demonstrate the first fundamental welfare theorem, and I want to put that there. Okay, then let me try to see if I can draw this a little bit. So you can see the equilibrium there, and I'm just going to draw this just to be clear and specific in case there's somebody. But obviously, to that point where demand and supply cross, right? That's associated with a quantity, and that's what we're talking about, right? And it's associated with a price, which is our equilibrium price, right? I'm only drawing the arrow because I'm going to get rid of it in just a second, but I want to make sure that everyone knows exactly what those labels P star and Q star attached to, which is that point where they cross. Okay, so now, Arslan, we could, right, go ahead and compute we could compute the total surplus here, right?
Yeah.
And so if we were going to compute the total surplus, we would just take all of this area between the demand and supply curve, and that would be the total surplus associated with our equilibrium, right? And so what I want to do here is I'm going to go ahead and draw another set of axes below. And on this set of axes, I'm going to label it a little bit differently. So can you still see my second set of axes here, or do I have to move something?
We can see it.
Okay. So this I'm gonna label with Q, and so you can see that Q star would also correspond to a point down here on this axis, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm not going to label Q star there specifically, but what I'm going to put on this axis is net social benefit, right? So we can think of net social benefit as being a function of Q, and specifically the orange area we have there is the net social benefit of, and maybe is of Q star. That's one thing we will have computed, right? So our first fundamental welfare theorem says that basically, right, and I'll put a little bit more, be a little bit more specific. What we should have is, so I'll say, in other words, net social benefit is maximized at Q star. And I'll draw that out. Okay. And maybe I can. Okay, I'll highlight those words. So if I was gonna demonstrate this, then what else might I do to show that this statement is true, the what I have in pink? Arsenal, what would be my next step?
Graph out net social benefit.
Yeah. So I might then do what next? So, well, let's just give this a specific value because this might make it easier. We'll just say, for example, let's say this equals, and notice that net social benefit is quantity times price, right? So it's going to be a dollar amount. Let's say it's like $1,200, right? So yeah, I can put a point here just to make it look good. There's our NSB at Q star, that's 1 point. Okay, so, and can you see how that's at Q star and that's the NSB at Q star, right? So it's a specific, so what might I do next?
Next, you want to show how it's maximized, so draw
Yeah,
a line or something for net social benefit so we can see that.
well, how about this, right? So I've already, computed NSB for Q star, right? And graphed it, right? But if this is really the maximum of the net social benefit function, then how about picking some other Q, right? To get a couple other points on the function. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So one thing I might do is I might pick, let's call this Q, and I'll put it as a little q, low, which is a quantity that's lower than Q star, right? And then I could go ahead and calculate, again, NSB at Q low. right? And if NSB at Q star is truly the maximum, then this new net social benefit should be lower, right, than 1,200. It should be something like maybe $900, right? And can you see how I would calculate the NSB at Q low?
Well, I know it's within the total surplus range, or at least.
Well, yeah. So, well, this is the total surplus before at Q star, right? The area of that triangle. So let's just dump that, right?
Okay.
And then, because we want to recompute it, right? So if that's Q low, right, then I have this region, right? So I'm stopping production at some low quantity, and then I can recompute total surplus. Again, it's going to be the area between demand and supply, right, up to that quantity where I stop production. So this one's pretty easy. Can you see what I mean? That trapezoid is obviously smaller than the bigger triangle, and it corresponds to the total surplus of the first few units up to Q low. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. So then we have another point on our graph, and I'll go ahead and draw that. And sure enough, 900 is less than 1,200, so it's a lower point, right? Now, to finish it up, I should at least do one other point, right? And so because I haven't at all shown that net social benefit is decreased when I get to higher levels of Q than Q star, right? So see if you can complete this thought for me. So I'm going to do at some Q high, and we'll just put a number there. So I'm going to go ahead and put Q high, and it just means it's higher than Q star, right? So now what should I do?
I guess you want to do the same thing. Show it on both sides to make another like trapezoid or whatever.
Yeah, but do you kind of see like, and again, I don't know if you've been watching all the videos, but over here, right, things are a little different. Because whereas on the left-hand side, it's really easy to see that if you lower the quantity, you just get a smaller amount of total surplus. And I'll go ahead and get rid of that and get rid of that. Here, it's a little bit different because really kind of what you're doing, right, is you've got, for all of these units up to Q star, you've got all this total surplus here, which is, again, net social benefit, right? And then for these units over here, see, it's a little bit different because here remember the supply curve corresponds to the marginal social cost, and the demand curve corresponds to the marginal social benefit. And the area below those respective curves either corresponds to the total social cost or the total social benefit. And remember, net social benefit is equal to total social benefit minus total social cost. So the point is that over here, you have losses of total surplus because the costs of production are higher than the benefits of consumption. Do you see what I'm saying? Does that make sense?
Could you repeat that one more time, please?
Yeah. So over here on the right side of the equilibrium, the purple area I have is negative net social benefit because the costs are higher than the benefits for these units.
That makes sense. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, the costs of production. It's like, well, I'll give you an example. Sometimes the government subsidizes agricultural products so that they produce more than they would in a free market. And we could talk about like why that is. A lot of people are, and I don't know if you know about this, have you heard of agricultural price supports or money that Congress gives away to farmers to produce extra food?
Yeah, I've heard of that before.
Yeah, so it's actually a really big thing. You know, billions and billions of dollars every year is given away by our federal government to farmers for various purposes. But one of the things that's been done in the past is the government will say, okay, well, we'll pay you to produce this extra food, and then the government will give it away to people who are needy. And I put that in quotes because I'm going to tell you a story about my grandma getting cheese in just a minute. Or sometimes they give it away to foreign countries, right? Because we have plenty of food here. But the main thing is that these agricultural commodities are produced at levels that do not correspond to what consumers would normally want to purchase in a free market where there's just voluntary trade. So in order to get the higher level of production, the government pays and then gives it away. Okay. But I guess the thing that I wanted to point out is that so I don't know, do you know anybody that's gotten this? So my grandmother used to go down to her senior center, and she would get these 5-pound blocks of American cheese. Have you ever seen those?
Yes.
Oh, so Ben has seen them. Okay. So, but you, Arslan, you've never seen one?
Maybe at like Costco.
No, you wouldn't see it at Costco. You know why? Well, okay. Well, I'll tell you two things. One, you wouldn't see them at Costco because you may have seen a 5-pound block of cheese at Costco, but you wouldn't have seen a 5-pound block of this kind of cheese because, Ben, you said you know something about this.
Yeah, I mean, like, I don't know if this is correct, but like, this you're referring like how people say like the government cheese, right?
Yeah, and it's literally a 5-pound block. It's like this long and that big, and my grandmother would get it, and for me, it was like awful because I would stay with my grandmother in the summer, and when she'd go pick up her 5-pound block of cheese, it meant I was gonna have cheese sandwiches like every day with cheese on everything for, you know, like a month. And it's like the worst, in my opinion, blandest tasting. I like cheese, but like that cheese, like nobody would that I know of like would buy it voluntarily. Have you ever tried it, Ben? Do you know what I'm talking about?
No, but I remember like some of my friends telling me that it's just like almost like plastic, like, you know, it doesn't really melt. It's just kind of.
It's just awful. But the point is, right? So the cost of producing it is obviously higher if nobody wants to buy it, right? Remember, our social benefit is measured based on the willingness to pay of consumers. And down here, you can see for these units that are higher than Q star, obviously the willingness to pay is lower than the cost. So yeah, there's a waste, right? Because you're spending like, I don't know, say the government's spending $10, $15, $20 for one of these 5-pound blocks of cheese, and they got to give it away. Nobody wants it, right? My grandmother had to force me to eat it. So that's a type of waste too. So I guess going back, Arslan, can you see this is positive total surplus and this is negative total surplus? And when we have Q high, we have to add these two together to get a net amount. And the net amount's going to be smaller than the orange area also.
Yeah, that makes sense because
Yeah.
that's a negative value.
Yeah. So now if you go back through the videos for calculating a net social benefit, the description I gave you is not the preferred calculation method to get net social benefit for the higher quantity, but it's in the videos. So I'm not going to demonstrate it for you here, but I am going to go ahead and finish this up by putting another point down here at Q high. And actually, I should move this point over. Okay, Arslan, can you just give me a sanity check here that you understand that this dot goes with Q high over here, and
Yeah, that makes
this
sense.
dot goes with Q low over here. So actually, to do a good job, I should move this one over there. Not gonna let me. There. Oh, well, it didn't let me. Okay, I'll have to redraw that one. Okay. And I'll do this one again. Okay, there. So you can see the 3 dots, and I'm going to go ahead and erase that and erase that. And then actually, I don't know if you see, but we did what you suggested at the beginning, except for we just put more meat on the bone in the sense that we actually calculated 3 different values for net social benefit. And you can see the net social benefit function, right? If we trace it out, it's going to look like this and actually hit a peak, right? The top of it, the maximum, is at Q star. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yep.
All other quantities give us a lower net social benefit than Q star. And this is actually something that if you go through the exercises carefully and you compare the different levels of net social benefit, you can do yourself with a specific inverse demand and a specific inverse supply equation. And the whole point is, at the end, you're supposed to feel somewhat confident and also, knowledgeable about how to show that a competitive market really is efficient in the sense that Q star maximizes net social benefit. So that's our main demonstration. Do you have any questions? Okay, going once. Anybody have any questions?
Yeah, Professor.
Yeah, go ahead.
So on the net social benefit where it's Q high, why is it $750? Shouldn't it be more than $1,200?
No, because remember the purple's negative. Right? This area over here is negative. So we said at Q star, this whole area would be 1,200, right?
Right.
And then this is negative.
Got it. Okay. So the net
Yeah.
social benefit then would be less than what Q star is.
Yeah, because the purple area is a negative value because the costs here for these units are higher than the benefits. See, that's what's going on over here. You got positive net social benefit, or there's a positive amount of total surplus because the buyers represented by the demand equation, right? And that corresponds to the benefits, right? The marginal social benefits. The benefits are higher than the costs for these units. See the blue lines above the red one? Do you see, Stephen?
Yeah, got it. Thank you.
But over here, the costs are higher than the benefits. So this corresponds to negative total surplus. Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Okay. Are there other questions? I haven't been checking the chat. So, okay, seems like no. Okay. So, let's go ahead and take a look at this really quickly. So this is what we were working on for the Ignifium homework at the beginning, and the only thing I want to point out is so here this orange line corresponds to our price control, right? And you guys can see the P star, right? So since I was talking to you, Arson, I'll keep talking to you. We'll just finish it up, okay? Because we only have a few more minutes. You there?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So you see the price control, right? So it's the orange line.
Yep.
Yeah, okay. So here we have, and I'm moving it around, but notice, so this is a price ceiling, right? So the price can't be above it by law. It's a legal price regulation. So if the price ceiling is below the equilibrium price, then it's going to prevent the market from bidding the price up to the equilibrium price. Notice that at these lower prices, there's always going to be excess demand, or there's going to be a shortage. And so that would be this distance right here, where buyers want to buy more than sellers want to sell. Okay. Does that make sense, Arslan?
Yep. Makes perfect sense.
Yeah. So normally what happens is when a lot of people want to buy something and only a few people want to sell it, is the buyers usually, if the market's free, right? So it doesn't have any restrictions. People will bid the price up, right? But the price ceiling prevents that upward bidding due to the excess demand. So whenever there's excess demand, and I'll try to draw this, right? Normally, and I don't know if you can probably relate to this really easily right now. A lot of people say that in the housing market, there are a lot of people that want to buy houses because of the low interest rates, and there are only a few houses for sale. And so therefore, housing prices have been rising, right? You see my green arrow?
Yep.
But a price ceiling stops that, right? It says you can only have the price raised to some legal limit. And that's called, a good example of it is rent control is the most common example. But if for whatever reason, the government set the price ceiling above the equilibrium price, there would be no excess demand. And so there's no tendency for price to rise any higher than the equilibrium demand. So it would still stop here, right? So when you have a price ceiling that's above the equilibrium price, then the prevailing price ends up being the equilibrium price. And this price ceiling is an example of a non-binding price ceiling. So if you end up getting an example in Ignithium where you have a non-binding price ceiling, then a lot of your answers are just going to be equilibrium price, 0, excess demand, and all that. So you have to watch for that. Okay. There's another type of price regulation, which is the price floor. And a price floor, a good example of that. So when you think of price ceilings, think of rent control. Does everybody know what rent control is? Does anybody have any questions about that? Nobody. Okay. And what about Arslan? Can you think of a good example of a price floor? There's the one that always comes up. And it's actually an important one right now. They're debating it in Congress.
Minimum wage.
Yeah. So minimum wages. And so for a price floor, it's exactly the opposite, right? So a binding price floor is above the equilibrium price. And in the case of a binding price floor, instead of having excess demand, you have excess supply. There are more units being supplied than there are demanded. And what that normally does is it puts downward pressure on prices, right? So if I was to move to some place up here, I'll draw my arrows, right? If I have excess supply, then suppliers want to sell a lot of units and buyers don't want to buy that many. So suppliers tend to lower their prices. And in the labor market, when we have excess supply, do you know what we call that, Arslan?
Excess supply in the labor market.
Yeah. It's unemployment.
Yeah, I was about to say that. Yeah.
Yeah. So it means on the supply side, the reason why a lot of people have trouble thinking about the labor market is because in most situations, you as students are on the demand side. You demand Pepsi, you demand Coke, you demand shirts, right? You're the purchaser. But in the labor market, you're selling your labor, right? So you're on the supply side. And if the minimum wage is really high, then you have a lot of people who want to work, and you don't have a lot of employers that want to hire. And so you end up with excess supply, or you end up with unemployment. And so this is an example of a binding price floor. But if the minimum wage, and this is the debate right now, right? If the minimum wage is below the equilibrium wage, which is the price in the labor market, then we're in the same situation that the wages will drift down to the equilibrium level, but they won't go any further. So if, for example, the minimum wage was set at $1 an hour, right? Everybody currently earns more than $1 an hour, and it's unlikely that many people would work for less than $1 an hour, right? So a price floor that's below the equilibrium price is non-binding, and it has no impact on the market, and the prevailing price or the prevailing wage in the labor market is just going to be whatever the equilibrium price is. And so I'll just finish this up in just 1 minute, Arslan. Do you know people who are debating about this in Congress right now? Do you know what they think? Why it's kind of an issue?
Well, it depends on which side you're asking. But
Well, let's talk about both sides. Like, where's the debate?
The reason for it, I suppose, is that wages are not keeping up with inflation and just rising price levels in general.
Okay.
And then the other side would be that raising the minimum wage would cause inflation.
Yeah. So I think you're right on both parts, but the real issue is that underlies that is whether or not the current minimum wage, which is $7.25 an hour, if it's non-binding, right? Even raising it to, let's say, $10 an hour, it might still be non-binding. It's not going to do anything, right? But if it turns out that $15 an hour is somewhere up here, then you're going to generate unemployment, right? So the question for a lot of people is whether or not $15 an hour is somewhere around the equilibrium, or maybe even a little bit below it, in which case it won't have really any impact on the economy. Or if $15 an hour is going to generate significant unemployment because it's going to be a binding minimum wage. Does that make sense?
That makes sense, yeah.
Yeah. So and if you look at different economists and their opinions and stuff like that, depending upon who they're writing for, this is really the substance of the debate in our discipline is based on the proposed minimum wage increase from $7.25 to $15 an hour at the federal level, whether or not it's going to be binding or non-binding. And if it is going to be binding, is it going to be binding a little bit, generate a little bit of unemployment, or is it going to be really binding and generate a lot of unemployment? Yeah, that's the issue. Okay, so I will